Recording mode. Okay, we're going to start from Ois Hey, where he speaks about the Heirah from Klolos Parshas Bemidbar. Bemidbar, B'pshutish Mikra, the simple meaning of the word Bemidbar, Koi al Midbar Kipshuta is referring to the literal idea of a wilderness, of a desert, of somewhere that's uninhabited. It's not a place where human beings are settled over there. As he says, it's like it says in the pasuk, "Lo yoshav adam sham," no human being is settled over there. It's ki'im, rather, it's nachash sorav akrov. It's a place of snakes and scorpions and poisonous snakes, with and a thirst that there's no water over there. The intention and the idea over here in the pasuk is not the positive concept of midbar. In Chassidus, it speaks about there is a spiritual level of midbar, that when it says asher lo yoshav adam sham, since we know, according to Chassidus, there's something called Adam Ha'elyon. There is supernal man. There's a level of the Adam Ha'yoshev Ala Kisei that's brought down in the Vuas Yecheskel. So when we say Asher Lo Yoshav Adam Sham, a midbar, that there is no Adam over there, we're talking about some great spiritual level higher than the spheres, higher than Atzilus. So the Rebbe says that's not what the pasuk is talking about in the simple sense. We're not talking about the midbar the way the heads of and the highest levels of Yidden learn when they're learning about midbar. It's beyond the level of Adam. Adam, when the pasuk refers to a midbar that no man settled there, it's lamal yusa. It's speaking about in a positive sense. Rather, it's talking about a midbar according to the ideas of the most ordinary person, the literal idea of a wilderness, of a desert. And also what we're talking about in our parish in the midbar, we're not talking about a metaphor or a lesson that the Chazal learned from the characteristics of a desert concerning the Torah that was given in the midbar. Hein benegel lechefze the Torah kemidbar hefker shakol shavim ba. Both we derived from the idea of a wilderness concerning the object of the Torah. The object of the Torah is like the wilderness that is free for all, that everybody is equal. Anybody can approach Torah. You don't have to own it, you don't have to inherit it, and so on. Both also concerning the person that is studying the Torah, that we derive from a midbar, we derive from a wilderness, that the person establishes and places himself like this wilderness, that everybody steps in it, the same thing. The person needs to be someone that doesn't care how he's treated. He is completely humble. Obviously, it doesn't mean in an abusive fashion, but it means he doesn't care about his honor. That is a prerequisite for Torah study. So these are all great spiritual levels about midbar. But this is not the midbar that we're talking about over here. This is not the wilderness we are talking about over here. Ki'im lemidbar kipshute. We're talking about the literal idea of a wilderness, a desert. Im kol hachisroinus, with all the deficiencies, and all the things that are lacking in a wilderness. Like it's emphasized in the fact that the name of the parsha is not in the wilderness of Sinai, and we know the word Sinai can be a nickname for the Torah. Sinai relates to the Torah. The name of the parsha is just Bemidbar. So if it would be called, if the name of the parsha would be called Bemidbar Sinai, so then we're talking about, this is talking about elevated levels, spiritual levels, levels of great the spiritual significance, how through a state of midbar one can attain Torah. No, it's just talking about an ordinary wilderness. That's what the name of the parsha is about. Zois va'oid, in addition to that, Haisafed the ois beis bamidbar or bimidbar v'loy midbar, by adding the letter beis beforehand, which means in the wilderness, not just wilderness. Madgish oid yoiser emphasize even more. She'ein hakavanu letchunas hamidbar chulu. We're not just the intention over here for the characteristic of the wilderness, like we said, that Torah is free for all, like the wilderness is. We're talking about the person that finds himself in a wilderness. So finding oneself in a wilderness is seemingly a negative thing. Here comes the lesson that one has to live with the parsha of the week. In our situation, to live with the idea of being in the wilderness. What does that mean? How do you live with that? When a Yid looks around himself, he finds himself that he is found in a midbar, in a wilderness. In addition to the fact that you are the fewest, the least of all the nations, on top of that, the person finds himself in the darkness of the exile. When around him there are many different concealments and coverings, a place where a person cannot acquire enough to sustain himself through sowing and growth, like a midbar in a simple sense, a wilderness in a simple sense, a desert in a simple sense is not a place that is possible to plant. Or another way how a person can acquire his parnasa, his sustenance, is through having some type of water gathering, a collection of water, that he can go ahead and capture fish, and similar to that. This means there's no taste, there's no flavor, there's no delight in it whatsoever. What we have in a wilderness, a snake, a poisonous snake, scorpions, and thirst, that there's no water over there. Concerning this, we tell him, a person needs to live with the idea of a wilderness. To live with the Torah despite being in the wilderness. This means even while being in the wilderness, he acts the way a Jew is supposed to act. This means that his entire being and all of his matters are permeated with Torah. Just the opposite. Since he finds himself in the wilderness, this is even more important for him to be connected to Torah. If he finds himself in a settled place, in an inhabited place, and instead of doing what he's supposed to do, his work, instead he goes to sleep, he might truly be a fool for losing these opportunities. But on the other hand, he doesn't put himself in danger by not doing whatever work he's supposed to do. As opposed to when he's in the wilderness, he cannot go to sleep because he puts his life in danger from snakes and scorpions, etc. Elamai. So what's the option to do if he's in the wilderness and he wants to go to sleep? He's tired, he wants to rest. So then what advice can he get? That also his sleep should be according to Torah. How is his sleep according to Torah? Through reading Krishma before retiring. He sleeps with his head covered. Then the actual sleep itself becomes part of the service of Hashem. Until the soul rises upwards to draw more life for the next day. Similar to the idea that says that why did the Jewish people go to sleep the night before Matan Torah to such a degree that Hashem had to wake them up the next morning, is because they felt that the best preparation for the giving of the Torah would be for the neshama to go upwards and be filled with all the spiritual goodness that the neshama gets when it's above. Not only does he serve Hashem while sleeping in a dangerous place like a midbar, he lives in the wilderness. This means the way he acts according to Torah, despite him being in the wilderness, is not just out of necessity, but rather in a way that he lives with it. He does this out of vitality, energy, and joy. How come? Why is he doing this in the wilderness out of joy? He's just doing this to survive the wilderness. Seemingly, what joy is there? So he says, since he knows that Hashem brought him into the wilderness, he has no complaints. Therefore, he fulfills his job and his mission with life and vitality and joy. Like we said before, he's living, he's passionate, he's excited while being in the wilderness. So then the Rebbe says, seemingly a Yid can come with complaints. The Lechura Yachol Yehudi Lito, and seemingly a Jew can complain. If Hashem wants that he should really enjoy the service of a Yid, let him bring the Yid to Yerushalayim, the Beis HaMikdash, L'Kodesh Kadoshim, to the Beis HaMikdash and the Holy of Holies. V'sham yasik ba'avoida achi nailis, and over there in the Beis HaMikdash and the Kodesh Kadoshim will be involved in the highest, most service, avoida saktoidas, the avoida of the incense, which is even higher than the other karbonos and other things we do in the Beis HaMikdash. The question arises: Madua mevia Kadosh Baruch Hu Bemidbar? Why does Hashem bring him into the wilderness? The opposite of what we ask every morning in the morning brachas. Do not bring me to a test. Do not bring me to a challenge. How do we expect to do so out of joy and so on? How do we expect Hashem to enjoy this avodah? So the Rebbe says in the next page, "Ve'ein loymar shezel ba'ifn dechuka chakaktik zer gazarti she'en l'chorshus laharachra." Perhaps you could say that this is something that Hashem made a decree. You have no permission to think about it. So the Rebbe says that was last week's parsha. Don't get the parshas mixed up. The idea of a super rational decree, that has to do with last week's parsha. Parshas b'chukaisai, from the word chukah, a super rational decree. The Laila parshas Bemidbar shalachra, it has no connection with the parshas Bemidbar that follows it. Afal became still in all, ein li Yehudi tainus, a Jew has no complaints. Because even the most ordinary Jew understands that we can't ask questions about Hashem. And why? It's a very logical reason. One knows so by Kal V'chomer, how much more so from a human being. If he doesn't understand the mind of a great sage, of a great brain, even though I am human and that person is human as well, that great scholar is human also. That person who he doesn't understand was initially a small child, and he didn't understand as much as he understands now. And little by little, he increased more and more until he became a great sage. If he can't understand this sage that worked his way up to his level of understanding, How much more so that he cannot understand Hashem's mind. Therefore, even when Hashem brought the Yid into the wilderness, he knows this is also for the good. Not just that in the future it would be good, like the Rebbe always explains the difference between the two sayings. Kol ma David Rachman Latava, everything Hashem does is for the good, meaning it's for the future good, whereas Gam Zulataiva means now it's good. Al Kvar Akshav already now, this is for good, this is a good thing. And therefore, since the person realizes that being now in a midbar is a good thing, he fulfills his job and his mission out of life, vitality, and joy. The point of the lesson is when a Yid finds himself in the wilderness, he knows this is the actual will of Hashem. This means the supernal intention of Hashem is not that he should be in the Holy of Holies. Rather, while being in the wilderness, in this low world, that there's no lower world than it, and while his neshama is enclosed in his animal soul, in his physical body, which is brought down in Tanya, is called a snakeskin. In such a state he should live according to Torah. And even more so, only through this, by being in this world and living according to Torah, does he come to the ultimate ascent that there's nothing higher than this. Like the expression of the pasuk is concerning the Jewish people in Egypt, the more they afflict him, so he will increase and so he will break forth, meaning that it's in direct proportion to how much the suffering is, that's how much they increase. So the same thing in direct proportion to being in a midbar, in Geulah, that's how much we get to a higher and greater level in our connection and in our elevation and rise. Move on, and it's understood. This lesson is applicable to every single Yid. Both to the most ordinary Jew, that because of his primary service is involved in matters of this world, so he feels even more so the fact that he's found in the wilderness, because he's engaged in the wilderness. He's preoccupied with physical wilderness things. Also concerning, this lesson is also concerning your heads of tribes, despite the fact that their primary service is in the 4 cubits of Torah and holiness. They are also of need for the support of those that their service is in worldly matters, supporters for Torah, to such a degree that also they find themselves in the wilderness. Therefore, the above mentioned directive and lesson applies to them, that they need to live while being in the midbar. They have to be excited and vitalized to every single Yid. Now the Rebbe always wants us to live in 2 worlds that sometimes externally, superficially seems opposites, but for a Yid there's nothing contradictory. So he says over here, Maimer HaMuzger, parenthetically, Movin v'gam pashut, it's understood and it's also obvious, the Rebbe says. It's simple to understand this. Shekol la'amr le'il she'ein li'yehudi tainois ala uvda shakadosh baruch hu hevi b'midbar. Everything we said before, the Yid can't complain on the fact that Hashem brought him into the wilderness. It's only concerning fulfilling his job and mission to do so with vitality, energy, and joy. It doesn't mean that the Jew agrees to this and accepts it as an end in itself. And the Yid is not ready to remain in this state, Rahman Litzlan, heaven forfend, Gamba Osid Os in the future. Adrab, just the opposite. There's a big difference between the present and the future. Just to give a simple example before we read what we are talking about. A Yid can say, and a Yid must say, when something bad is happened or is happening, Gam zu l'toiva. Also, this is for good. But a person should not be saying, since everything Hashem is for good, Hashem does for good, so I'm not going to daven for actual revealed good to come out. Am I not going to say that we should have the best of everything in our physical world in a way that I should be able to see it down here below? Of course not. Not only am I supposed to daven for it, I'm supposed to have betochen and expect that it will be revealed good, even though now at present I'm saying gamzu l'toiva, because there's a difference, as we've spoken about often in our Simcha Shiurim, between how do we look at something that has occurred versus the future. For the future, we only need to insist that things should be good in a revealed way. In a similar vein, it's not the exact same thing, but in a similar vein, the fact that we are now in Geulah and that we have lived through Geulah up till now, yes, we're supposed to do it with life and vitality and joy and realize that this is l'toiva and this is good and this is beneficial and so on. But when it comes concerning the next moment, the next second, the next day, the next week, chas v'sholem, to make peace with the fact that we're in Geulah. Adrabah, last line, just the opposite. Benegel la'asid, concerning the future, tzoyek Yehudi, a Yid cries out, Elikim al domilach, al tichra, al tachroish, do not be silent, Hashem, val tishket el, and Hashem should not be quiet. That Hashem has to intervene and not let it go on this way, the way it is in Geulah. He knows that there is an advantage in the avoid of the time of Geulah. Ha'avoida, the iskafia, the avoid of subjugating and sublimating klippah. Through this we come to the advantage of transforming the klippah. In last week's parsha, we learned that I will make cease wild animals, evil animals from the earth. And the Chazal explained, Mashbison shelo yaziku. It doesn't mean he will remove them completely, they will cease to exist, but rather he will stop them from being damaging. They will not damage anymore. That's the idea of transforming them. That Hashem will transform the nature of the animals, like it says concerning Moshiach's times, that the wolf will live with the sheep, and a young child will lead these animals that are ordinarily wild. And it's obvious the obvious thing is, and the main thing is that it's obvious that the main thing is the advantage that's going to be by the young child, because of the idea that the wild animals will be transformed. The imloikein ketzad yitochen sha'ilu del asid lavi is bata bekach shel yelad Yehud yidag l'mechyosen shabalachayim. How is it possible that the great advantage of Mashiach's times will express itself in the fact that a young child will be concerned about the animals having what they need to survive? Rather, the point of this pasuk is showing about how the wild animals will be so domesticated. And how will it reach such a state of the wild animals being so domesticated when Mashiach comes that even a young child would lead them? This advantage and quality comes about through the avodah of subjugating and transformation of the clip of the time of Geulah. Aval became, but still in all, la'achri kol eluyim, after all of these great advantages of the time of Golus, of how our eskafia, how our sublimating clip in the time of Golus will lead to amazing things in Mashiach's times. A Jew is not ready to remain in exile even one more moment. Therefore, a Jew requests and asks in every single davening, let our eyes see when you return to Tzion with mercy. Gimel Palm Yayim, he says it 3 times a day by Shachris Mincha Ma'ariv, Obiyam Shabbos, and on Shabbos when there's an additional tefillah b'musaf, so he says it Dalet Palm, he says it 4 times a day. V'haga atzmecha. Think about the following. Betfilah Shachris Yom Shabbos, when it came to Shachris davening of Shabbos, Mevakish Yehudi, a Yid asks, you let our eyes see in your return to Tzion with mercy and compassion. Bakosha and the Meres Betfilas Hamida, a request that said in the Shemoneh Esrei, after the prefacing that we're saying Hashem should open up my lips and my mouth should relate your praises. Okay, Pirish Admur Marash, like the explanation of the Rebbe Marash, skip the brackets, that the word Yagid is from the word drawing down. Skip the brackets again. Like one that's responding after the reader. So in other words, the Eibishter is like the reader, and a Yid is just responding and saying the words that Hashem supplied him with. So he is saying what Hashem wants him to say. After asking this in the silent Shemoneh Esrei, in an inner voice that's not heard, the Shlech Tzibur, the Chazan, repeats this and asks this another time. And not only does he ask it in the same way it was asked before, he asks this in a loud voice, since he is the representative of the congregation. Skip the brackets 4 lines down. Since the mighty God does not despise the tefillah of a rabbim, he has the courage to ask it loudly because he has the support and he represents the whole congregation. Va'afal became still in all, kavur meshach zman, when a certain amount of time passes in the morning davening of Shabbos, la'achrei kriyas haTorah, after reading the Torah, va'amiras ashrei, and saying the ashrei yoshev v'secha, the koi b'pashtus hay-al yeshiva b'beis Shakadosh Baruch Hu, where it says, fortunate is those that are sitting in your home, it's referring to, in the simple sense, sitting in the home of Hashem, which is the Beis Hamikdash, Bezman Geulah. That he's saying that how fortunate a Yid is to be in the Beis Hamikdash during the time of the redemption. When Ashrei is over and he sees that Mashiach still didn't come, he again asks, let our eyes see when you return to Tzion with compassion. Therefore, there is no agreement, chas v'sholom, from the Jews' perspective, al ha'sharus begolus Bemidbar, on remaining in exile, which is the desert. Ha'hepechu anochin. The opposite is true. Yeshna bakosha v'drisha lotzis ma'golus take from yad. There is the request and the demand to leave Golus immediately. Hakavona ba'amar le'il she'ayudein ba'batainasi. So what does it mean, what we said before, that a Jew is not complaining, he's not attacking Hashem for the fact that he's in Golus? It's only concerning the past. Concerning fulfilling his job and mission as long as he is in the wilderness. Then the Rebbe goes on and speaks about the paroiches that was covering the vessels in the Migdash, and especially the Aron, and then we're going to skip over to the bottom of the next page where the Rebbe says, Hayram Mekala Amur Le'il B'Negel L'Maisa, the lesson from all of the above concerning action, which Hamaisa Hu Ha'ikir, that action is what is primary. Yehudi Tzarech Ladas, a Jew has to know, Sha'atachos HaKavonehi, that the ultimate intention is Shavidasei Tia, Loi B'Kodesh HaKadoshim Kim Bemidbar, not in the Holy of Holies, but his goal is to be it in the wilderness. Ubemidbar Gufam, and in the wilderness itself, B'Maimed Matzav Sha'aron V'Aluch Shabai Mechusa B'Kisei Tachash, that it's covered up with the skin of the Tachash, like that part of the Sikha where the Rebbe was speaking about that we skipped, like it was by the Jewish people when they were traveling through the wilderness of the nations. This means the ultimate purpose is to make for Hashem a home down here below. Through the general avoid in this low world that there's nothing below it. And especially in the time of exile, during the heels of Mashiach, a double and quadruple darkness, like the Gemara describes at the end of Masechta Sotah. Let's skip over the next two paragraphs till after the brackets. Shekain, because why is it this such an exciting time being in the Midbar, even though we want to leave the Midbar? Because this avoida affects a delight and enjoyment above in the most highest manner. Despite all the obstacles and difficulties of the darkness of exile, a double and quadruple darkness, Yidden withstand the challenge. They fulfill the Torah and its mitzvahs in actuality. Like it's explained in many places, the meaning of the pasuk. That Moshe was the most humble person from every person upon the face of the earth. That his main humility was before the generation of the heels of Moshiach. The mitzvahs, when Moshe Rabbeinu saw the manner of their service in fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs, regardless of all the different obstacles and difficulties, he saw the great and powerful pleasure and delight and joy that's above, that occurs above. Like we said before, ein kol stira bekach letikva v'tzvio bakasha shetovik varagula mitzvah shleima. There is no contradiction whatsoever to the hope and looking forward and the request that the Geulah that's true and complete should come already. The entire purpose and goal of the descent into exile is through that it will merit to the ultimate ascent of the future redemption. This is also emphasizing the fact that as a preparation for Parshas Bamidbar, Kodim and Parshas B'chokoyse as a pasuk v'oilech eschem koyem mius. In the Parshas B'chokoyse, we read the pasuk, I will lead you upright. Hayud v'oilech eschem koyem mius, the promise that I will lead you upright. Koyal agula mitzvah shleim, it's referring to true and complete redemption. Geulah shein achara golus, a redemption that has no golus that chas v'shalom ever follow it. Shekain Geulah sheyesh al achara golus chas v'shalom, a redemption that will be followed by a golus, heaven forbid. You can't call it being upright in its true manner. Not only that, there's even a reason to think that such a type of redemption, that there is a golus following it, heaven forbid, perhaps such a Geulah was not even worthwhile. Because the suffering of exile is greater when in the interim they felt a taste of Geulah. And the Rebbe says, regardless of how we discuss this and how we analyze this, there's no need in a whole discussion and explanation. Even the most ordinary person understands that when it says, I will lead you upright, it's going on the true and complete redemption. Like we said, this promise that I will lead you upright, we read in Parsh Bemidbar as a preparation and an introduction to Parsh Bemidbar. The intention of this is to emphasize even before arriving at the state of in the wilderness, Yeridas HaGolus, the descent into exile. Yoidim Kvar, we already know. Shatachlas HaKavana, the Bemidbar, the ultimate purpose and intention of Midbar is the advantage of I will lead you upright, Geulah Amitis V'Ashleiman, the true and complete redemption. They close Ma'asein over the Saint of Zman HaGolus. We merit this through our general actions and service throughout the time of Golus. Like we said before, out of vitality and joy, until in the final days of Golus, that all the Jewish people will have light in their settlements, like it was when they went out of Mitzrayim, when Pari was still in his full force. Already then, during the plague of darkness, Pari was still ruling Mitzrayim in full force. All the Jewish people had light in their settlements. And immediately following this great light that was in the final days of Golus, Gam Inyan HaSimcha, also the joy in its fullest sense, just like when this power of Pari was totally nullified with the plague of the firstborn, so too it should be for us. In such a way that we don't have to wait even a few days. It should be immediately that way.